Cominciamo l'ultima sessione.
So let us begin the last session of our conference,
Che diventa una sessione di conclusione.
It is a conclusive session, the end of a path that we've walked together that will allow us to open up new pathways of reflection. We started with this idea and we organized this study seminar that has seen the involvement of various topics of various disciplines in order to talk about consecration. And then, after the seminar, we have tried to continue the exploration of this topic through this Congress. Well, the passage from the seminar to the Congress allowed us to understand what we have already done and what is still yet to be done. Now, the three approaches that we've had over the past few days, the biblical approach, the theological charismatic approach, and the juridical approach, have once again made us understand the complexity of a problem, but also the need to overcome certain ambiguity so that we may have a greater clarity from a theological standpoint, but also from a juridical standpoint, especially with regards to the specific consecration, baptismal consecration, that sees us all as members of the people of God. Now, yesterday we listened to one another, and today we are going to synthesize the work of yesterday. In fact, we will have a report from the various groups. Now, we will follow a certain order, and we will see how the various realities that took part in the debate on consecration and on consecrated life in general, how they expressed what emerged from their individual contexts. Now, we will follow a certain order, so we will call one reality at a time so that we can have a synthetic picture of the work that the various realities carried out yesterday.
Parlerò in spagnolo.
I'm going to speak Spanish. You will be my people and I will be your God. We started by recalling the objective, the goal of the work that we were supposed to do in the afternoon. We tried to eliminate any ambiguity from the word consecration, and we tried to highlight what unites all of us, which is the baptismal consecration. We have highlighted the various specific aspects of every form of life, especially with respect to baptismal consecration, without actually eliminating any difference. Sister Carmen Ross Norte. This is how we want to strengthen our identity and our mission, and this is how we have tried to conduct our work on the three questions that were given to us for our reflection. Now, we would like to present a synthesis of what was done by the groups in the afternoon of yesterday, so that we may present the most important contributions. We started from a global view, from a global vision that has to do with different cultures, different visions, which are interwoven with one another. Then we we will focus on the answers to the various questions. Of course, we tried to find some common threads to the questions. And then we will try also to present some specific terms to answer the three questions. Now, what is the specificity with respect to the baptismal consecration in your consecration? Now, the dialogue focused on the importance of religious consecration, and we asked ourselves whether it has any point of contact with baptismal consecration. This entails that we need to identify with the image of a river. The river has various possibilities. The water has various possibilities to flow. It flows in all directions. It is a form of life, and the various lifestyles allow us to have this multi-directional approach. We also attached to this in a eschatological sense, a total abandonment, total surrender to Christ, to God, in order to follow our mission and our vocation. We've also seen in our working groups the importance of the baptismal consecration through the evangelical councils, life in common and spirituality. And therefore, it is a universal experience that pushes us to go beyond, to somehow overcome our own limits, our borders, our frontiers, so that we can achieve an intercongregational aspect. We need to benefit from the richness that this entails.
De un trabajo, comillas,
We also highlighted the need to network. Networking is fundamental because this gives us the possibility to live our reality in a different way in order to better serve our brothers and sisters. And now, in this consecration, the specific aspect is given to this consecration. The specificity of this consecration is provided by these evangelical councils, and we especially focused on life and mission in common. All the rest ensues from this, which is our basis, our core. At the same time, we need to commit publicly, and we need to do so through the baptism by way of the religious profession. The baptism is the answer to a new call under a stable form of life that is characterized, that is fully nourished by the gospel in a specific charisma that allows us to live out the mission. Now, if this degree of consecration is ignored, if it is neglected, well, it is true that starting from this consecration, new processes of stable life ensue. They lead us to serve the others, to live our lives to serve the others, and they lead us to live our fraternal life as a sign of the King of the God. Of our God in the most profound eschatological sense. The experience of salvation that we've just mentioned can also be perceived thanks to the evangelical councils, which are a configuration with Christ according to our specific charisma. This is translated into a total gift of ourselves. So we provide all of our energy to Christ and to God. So we have to be like the arms of a mother and a father who always generate life without ever forgetting God. It is also very important to consider consecrated life that is marked by the baptism, but generated within the church. And those So the Church confirms our lifestyle. It is, therefore, a core within another core, a specific core that consists in totally belonging to Christ. The baptism calls us, Christ configures us according to a specific charisms, and our work has to constantly become part of a stable work. It is not a process that can be chosen occasionally, but it is the total sacrifice of our life in every action, in every activity that we perform and that we carry out. So this is the answer to our first question. The exclusivity of our path entails a total gift of ourselves, and we search for God, and we are totally devoted to searching God. The search for God. Second question. Now, observing the various forms of the Sequela Christi by the profession of the evangelical councils, which are the common elements and which are those that express the originality of your group of religious institutes in particular. Well, let us now present the common elements, also considering that some of them probably also express the originality that I will name later on. Now, the common elements rely on the baptismal consecration. However, it is important to say that even if these are common elements, the new forms of life, or the new ways in which these are lived out and passed on, well, these ways of living them are quite different. In fact, we have observed that we all profess the vows. For some, there are public vows, for others, there are private vows. And the call to holiness is a common element. It is a continual relationship between God and ourselves. It is a call that becomes also present in our mission with our brothers and sisters within our communities. It is also important to observe at present that even if we contemplate the term fraternal life, well, not everyone refer to life in common, and not even the fact of having a formation structure entails that this life in common is the same for everyone. Another common element has to do with accompaniment in formation and also spirituality, our likeness to Christ, our configuration to Christ, the evangelical councils, the spiritual lives, the mission according to the specific charism, our ecclesial belonging or membership, and being an eschatological sign. At the same time, another common element is a specific love for our founders or founderesses who've opened up new ways to live out communion and the covenant. At the same time, the proclamation of the kingdom, the prophecy, and also our willingness to live as true children of the Father, our being witness of God and of His endless love. And then with regards to the elements that express the originality of religious institutes, well, we've highlighted the following ones. Probably I have already mentioned them a minute ago, but they I think that they've been also presented by other groups yesterday. Well, these elements are maybe common to other groups, but they're lived out in a different way. For instance, contemplative prayer, mission, the thesis, life in common, the structure of formation and government. Some profess public vows, so it is fundamental to live out one's charism. And then we have a fourth vow, besides the three ones that we know of. This group also discussed the experience, how we live evangelical vows, fraternity organized on the basis of a specific reality and then our presence in the world, the charismatic specificity which gives unity and discernment to live a common project. Again, other elements of originality are the commitment so that an institute can have a community life with brothers and sisters together. It is an eschatological sign. According to one of the founders of the institutes that were present in our group. And then, as a public profession, according to the charism, fraternal life in community for the mission, the separation from the world, which allows us to overcome the difference between world and being mundane. And then we also talked about the sense of the mission entrusted to the institutes, not to individuals, but to a whole congregation. This also entails that we need to have everything in common. We need to understand this diversity of our lifestyle, which can be contemplative or active. And then other forms, elements of originality are the vows received by authority in the presence of the people of God, the constitutions approved according to a language that refers to the absolute availability to willingness to serve the gospel, even if this service can be different, can vary from one group to another. This obeys our charisma. Many of us feel a void, they feel lost. Many of us do not know the new institutes of a religious life, and this has generated a void. Third question. What changes need to be done to canon law so that it can follow life? According to our dialogue, this question is not easy at all. But rather, in this presentation, we will present the various viewpoints, saying that many know the theme. Others have also talked about the void, the juridical void. Some others instead said that they don't know canon law properly, therefore they couldn't say anything. However, what we can say is that in today's cultural differences, we can find many problems that unfortunately canon law does not address. Canon law needs to be renewed, to change, so that it can include the possibility of new forms of life, which are not present in the current canon law. Religious men and women living in the same community, for instance, it is a reality that exists today, but there are no elements in canon law about this. It is also necessary to open our doors to new forms of life, and at the same time, it is fundamental to have tools that can help us address problems generated by people who live in our communities. Would it be possible to introduce some canons where, for instance, a group is allowed to make decisions in the place of just the superior general, so there would be a group of people making decisions that would not be left only to the superior general. And then the authority of diocesan priests who abuse their powers over the religious communities. These are questions, these and many other questions were raised. And these pushed us to say that canon law needs to be changed. It would also be appropriate to know whether the ordination of women is could become a possibility, and it would also be necessary to precise when members of community can leave a community and for how long. This is absolutely fundamental. At the same time, it would be important to also establish new canons for the relationship of our authority. How can we separate pastoral care or the ministry from the administrative skills, knowing that these are two realities which are totally different from one another, and at times they may generate problems. At the same time, it is appropriate to include some canons that give the possibility to involve lay people, both men and women. This, therefore, would require a deep renewal of canon law. And this said, we have 2 pages. I still have 2 other pages, but I believe that I will not have the time to read them.
Ringraziamo
Let us thank the speaker for summing up with the conversation of yesterday, but I would like to ask the speakers not to exceed the 10 minutes they have been allotted, no more than that. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to finish on time. We know what the questions are. We know the problems behind them. It's best to give answers that are in line with the questions. Of course, we can review the entire code, but this is not the place to do that, and we are not even legislators. So as far as the topic of consecration is concerned, we need some deepening of the theological and legal type, but as far as priesthood of women and broader systems, this is not the place where we can have this discussion. So please let us try and stick to the theme of the conference that has to animate our reflections, and also with the food for thought that we are going to produce for further discussions. I will be speaking in French. Good morning to everyone. I will briefly present the results from the discussions of the group made up of secular institutes. As far as the first question is concerned that has to do with the specificity, baptism is the root of all consecration. It is a gift that is received and that can be understood gradually in life while you live it. Baptism is a call to live the fullness of Christian life. And from baptism, all the ministries and the services are born, and we all receive through baptism a call, a calling, and a specific vocation. Our vocation to live a consecrated secularity is a calling that comes to us during our lives and during our personal histories, to live in the world the sequela Christi in its form of life. And this brings us to have a greater awareness and knowledge of our baptism, which we must rediscover on this occasion. The whole world and the whole of creation and men and women are all consecrated to God as a memory of time and as a memory of the historical life of Jesus and his mother. The term consecration, which we all share, usually indicates the separation from the world, but in the spirit of secular institutes and with reference to the specific consecration, there is this awareness that from incarnation there is no more a separation between a sacred and a secular space. Now, if we move on to the second question, in other words, common elements and specific elements, well, we have found a methodological difficulty in this case. So we knew less about the new forms of consecrated life. So it was difficult to find common points because we had to consider all existing situations. So we came to the conclusion that we could propose specific elements rather than common ones. A number of secular institutes is a testimony to the fact that you can live out the gospel in the insecurity of the lives of these institutes, because they can only offer and show the world their own way of life and their own way of being in the world. So we focus on the aspect of personal responsibility. Members recognize that their vulnerability is a gift, so an element of proximity and trust that per se represents a mission. Life according to evangelical counsels requires permanent formation pathways, and it needs support in a fraternal life according to secular forms. And our mission consists in being secular, and we live in our work and in our everyday lives because with the means of the world, we try to fulfill our mission in a tight relationship with the world, while listening to the Word of God, which is also expressed within the world through the signs of the time that for us are a constant calling. Our mission has a secular character, also when it is expressed in the services to the Church, such as catechesis. Now, let us move on to the third question that has to do with canon law aspects. Well, a first observation is the following. When secular institutes have a canon law issue, we normally refer to what the code says, the various rules concerning the religious. We hope that there could be other more specific canons that could apply more clearly to our institutes. We would also like to have some changes in the terminology used by law. An example, the use of the term vows to express vows. In many countries and with many people, vows mean religious life. Could we not use another term to avoid this misunderstanding? But also in canon law texts and in the practice of many dioceses, we often hear about religious life instead of consecrated life, therefore excluding all the other forms of consecrated life. An observation of the linguistic type. We are secular institutes, but if you translate this into English and use the word secular, in English, secular is something that has got nothing to do with the religion. And also in German, there is this problem. And the term in German is anti-religious. So beyond these linguistic differences, perhaps we should reflect in order to renew this expression, secular institutes. And I conclude by saying another thing that has to do with canon law. The use of the term consecration or consecrated person does not represent the same thing when we are dealing with the Institutes for Consecrated Life and the old Pontifical Council for the Laity that has become the Dicastery for the Laity, Family and Life. And I conclude with this, and I thank you for your attention.
Ringraziamo.
Let us thank the spokesperson of secular institutes, and we thank him for the clarity of what he said and for keeping with the time it was allotted, and also because things he said we all share the things he said. The problem of the name religious life and consecrated life is an ancient problem. If you look at the documents of the Council, Perfecte Caritatis, a subtitle is De accomodata renovazione vitae religiose, of religious life. And it speaks of consecrated life because in Perfecte Caritatis we also speak about other things, but in the subtitle we hear about consecrated life, but it is refined as religious life. So there is this ambiguity that emerges also in many other documents in which the religious are addressed, but religious mean really all consecrated people. And the fact that the adjective secular is ambiguous and that it can be changed, well, this is no problem. This is something that has happened with the societies of Apostolic Life that have remained basically the same in the old code and in the new one, except that before they were called societies of common life without vows, and they are called societies of Apostolic Life. So the name has changed, which is more in line with the reality of these societies, compared with the fact that they were negatively defined as without vows. So we can think of a name that could qualify secular institutes in a more appropriate way, more in line with their actual nature. I will be speaking in Italian. I'm presenting the Ordo Virginum, and I thank you for this opportunity of formation and sharing, which we were given within the context of this conference, but also within the context of our group, that because of its unique vocation is marked by very different voices, which we try to sum up with the moderator of the group. And I apologize to start with, if I leave out some details. We also looked at the three questions, starting from baptism, that makes us new people, children of God, called to sanctity. We discover our vocation as a gift of the grace to live our personal calling to holiness. And this gift in consecration is what constitutes us. So it constitutes us as an image of the nuptial church, the church as a bride. So the whole people is the spouse of Christ. The Church generates us with baptism, and it becomes an icon of nuptiality. We feel really attracted by the beauty of the Church. This is a common element to the point that we deliver ourselves to it so that its face as a bride may shine and therefore indicate and reflect the beauty of the spouse, of the bridegroom. Him, the most beautiful among the children of men, is also the face of he who has no appearance or beauty, who has been crucified for the love of everyone, even those who seem to have been disfigured in the eyes of the world, for whom we feel with him to be called upon to give life in the Church and for the Church. Even though it is not a sacrament that grants a character, the consecration establishes with Christ a nuptial and a total and exclusive relationship which is forever and which is fed and made alive every day through prayer. And in particular, for us, the liturgy of the hours that was entrusted to us by the Church that accompanies the giving of the ring makes us instruments of communion and intercession with the local and the universal Church, the bishop, the ministers, and it opens up our hearts so that we learn every day to look to our brothers with the same gaze of mercy of Christ. With reference to other forms of consecration that are lived out through evangelical counsel in the fidelity to one's charism, Ordo Virginum is called upon to endorse the charism of virginity in the heart of the Church, virginity for the integrity of the Church. This charism is incarnated in the beauty of the gift of femininity. This too is one of the properties of the Church, and Pope Francis has been repeating this often. The Church is a woman, it's a mother, and it is incarnated in the various personal charisms. This has the effects that within the Ordo Virginum there is a great variety of ways of responding to this vocation, but we are called upon to live this out in a creative freedom for which we need a great sense of discernment and also great responsibility. Sense of responsibility also in the absence of a vow of obedience. We need constant readiness to open up to the Spirit, and therefore a sincere docility, a feeling with the Church that keeps us in this communion without professing the vow of poverty. We live this commitment in terms of having to provide for our own lives, and at the same time endorsing the criteria of Jesus in the use of our goods and in helping us out, our brothers and sisters. The absence of structures, which, however, is replaced by belonging to the diocese, and the absence of a common life places us in the ordinary condition of solitude, which is a deep experience of intimacy with the Lord, and at the same time a condition that leads to fragility that requires us to live it out as a condition of a total opening of the heart and as a sharing of the many solitudes of the men and women of our times, and as a space that increasingly must be inhabited by the Lord, in whose presence we live, and in intercession and adoration, which is a form of prayer that for us is very important. In responding to the third question, we reflected considerably because our group has some unique features, and I don't know if this is an advantage or an obstacle. We had a high number of experts in canon law in our group. So, joking aside, the essentiality and the shortness of the rules that currently regulate our form of life has led to a number of questions concerning some specific topics. And I will just list three rapidly. The criteria for vocational discernment and the ways in which to offer an adequate formation pathway. The possibility to formulate differently the expression accedit of Canon 604 that seems to us not clarifying sufficiently our belonging to consecrated life. And last but not least, we need a deepening of the meaning and of the implications of our belonging to a diocese, particularly with reference to the connection, the relationship with the bishop, because he is the one who consecrates us with a public rite in the cathedral, and he brings us in, and our vocation right from the early times comes from the heart of the shepherds. So every bishop has to be aware of the responsibility, pastoral responsibility that he has with reference to us as consecrated person, and of the charismatic and prophetic richness that the Ordo Virginum represents in the universal church and in the particular church in which our vocation, in which we are rooted with our vocation, and in which we live with joy, gratitude, and stupor for the mystery that calls upon us.
Bene, ringraziamo la porta.
Very well. I would like to thank the representative of the Ordo Virginum for her synthesis. This was very. We share what she said, of course, because we have already mentioned the problem of the verb accedunt, referred to the Ordo Virginum, the access to the, well, vis-à-vis the Institute of Consecrated Life, and this is something that needs clarification. Always, of course, bearing in mind, and we can say this at the end of our conference, the true common platform, common to all the forms of consecration, as this is the celibacy for the kingdom. We can be very diverse, there can be very many common elements. However, the celibacy for the kingdom is what binds us together, all the forms of specific consecration. Let us now and I would like to ask His Excellency to say what the Dicastery is doing with regards to Canon 604, and especially with regards to the Ordo Virginum.
Soltanto per chiarire, perché
This is simply to clarify, because they referred to Canon 604. Now, the Dicastery, after a long ad intra reflection and after a consultation with also some experts, not least our consecrated virgins, well, the Dicastery completed an instruction that it has already been formally approved by the Holy Father, so this is quite advanced. But however, at the moment, this instruction is being. However, we are also consulting other dicasteries of the Roman Curia to avoid any possible contradictions or any difficulty, basically. So we may say that the Ordo Virginum will very soon have its own specific instruction published, issued by the Dicastery. This instruction will somehow clarify the characteristics of this order and also the directory. This will be done to also help the bishops, because at this moment, even if the order is actually approved by the Church officially, there are no guidelines from the Church in order to unite, to join all the experiences of the Ordo Virginum. So I expect that in 1 or 2 months, the Ordo Virginum will have this instruction, which will be highly important for them.
Hablaré en español a nombre del.
I'm going to speak Spanish on behalf of the new forms. First question. In your consecration, what is the specificity with respect to the baptismal consecration? Well, we have reached this conclusion. What is our specificity is to propose Christ, chaste, poor, and obedient. Second, according to our own charisms. Any baptized person is called to live out the priestly dimension, the royal dimension, and the prophetic dimension. And therefore, it is difficult to compare the baptismal consecration, our form of consecration, because the consecration of consecrated life is anyway rooted in the baptism. That is why we need to really be aware of the differences. Some said that our specificity is our radicality. Others said, no, it is better not to mention radicality because it is a call for all the baptized. Others instead mentioned the prophetic dimension, but this is what is specific to our consecration is the aspect of martyrdom. Another specific point is that we were called by God to carry out a specific mission, an actual mission. In the new forms, we see the coexistence of various forms of life that pick up not only a lifestyle but a stable form of life, because we all comply with the constitutions approved by the Church. Through the baptism, we become creatures of God, children of God, and we become brothers and sisters of all the others, men and women. So the charismatic consecration probably does not change our state of life or the essence itself, but it generates a new type of relationships among the various states of life. And then the stable form of life of the members of the new forms is characterized by three elements: the personal call or vocation to a specific mission, and then the fact that the Church recognizes us, and the fact that we belong to a family because we live new relationships in communion with the other states of life. Second question, on the originality. Now, one juridical identity in which men and women, priests and lay people, married and unmarried couples with different forms of belonging, embrace the same charism. Some feel called to highlight the contemplative dimension and also the missionary dimension. In the new forms, we see there are people who believe that chastity for the kingdom is the main vow, obedience and poverty. They are means to purify ourselves to live out chastity. But there are also people who believe that in including married couples, the counsels are enlarged, so poverty, chastity and obedience. Clearly, they are not impoverished if we also admit married couples. We like to be called an ecclesial family because consecration is understood from the perspective of the Trinity. So we do not exclude the Christocentric consecration, because this opens up to the idea that the originality doesn't rely on demanding and force the state of life. This is not our intention, because new ways, new relationships can be generated among the various states of life. And that is why we like to be called a family. At the same time, the term ecclesial also shapes the various vocations of the states of life. This also entails some reciprocity and complementarity. And as we are clerics and non-clerics, men and women, this also entails reciprocity and complementarity. Now, the third question. Canon law should follow life, and it must follow life. It must describe but not define. It should not. It should give new impetus. The mystery of Christ, of God, is a paradox. So a risk that we may run is to only focus on what is possible to human beings and forgetting that God can lead us to new horizons when He blesses humanity. So it is necessary to have the humility to welcome the experience of the Church. We also have 10 proposals to present. 10 proposals. To change the title on Consecrated Life. It should be entitled The Consecrated Life and not the Institutes of Consecrated Life. And it should give more space should be given in the code to the theology of communion that was developed by Vatican II. Second, we suggest the establishment of a mixed communion among the various dicasteries, as the Apostolic Exhortation Vita Consecrata suggested, number 62 in particular. Third proposal, to define something carefully, in the sense that when there is no clarity, we should not define, for instance, the new forms which are bestowed by God on the Church. At the same time, there is a need to recognize their statutes, the statutes of these new forms. Fourth, the word charism should be promoted further and not patrimony or rather legacy. Father Garcia Paredes talked to us about charismatic consecration, and he said that the charism is what consecrates and binds us together. Fifth, we have to be aware because the rules that govern religious institutes should not be applied to the new forms. That is why it is important to accept and approve the statutes and constitutions of these new forms. When new groups are established, they should not follow the rules of other institutes, but they should follow their charism, so that we can have a description and not a definition. Sixth point, some asked to reflect once again on the terminology, so that we do not use consecration both for the baptismal consecration and for the consecration or the profession of the vows or the charismatic consecration. And then with regards to the canons, in Canon 605, the expression new forms should be changed with other forms. A person said that then these canons should actually be implemented. 8. Maybe we could also we could introduce a new canon that could take into consideration the ecclesial family without eliminating 605, because that would give a space, would make room for other forms that could emerge in the future and that do not belong to the ecclesial family. So a new canon should be added to include the elements of the ecclesial family. Stability should be recognized as a form of life and not as a lifestyle. And equal dignity should be given to multiple vocations. And then the fact of being mixed, mixed communities, men and women. At the same time, the concept of covenants or alliance should be used as a great way to enter, to access the ecclesial family. Ninth proposal. Some asked to use the criteria of distinction between man and woman, and not the separation through branches, by means of branches. So it would be appropriate to introduce in Canon 578 the figure of the mixed institute next to lay and religious institutes, as Vita Consecrata number 61 proposed. This would allow to the forms who do not want to separate themselves into branches to have the women and the brothers, non-priests. They could take up places of responsibility. And last but not least, we at the new forms, we wanted to have a group, a reflection group, so that we may continue this study.
I
would like to thank the spokesperson for the new forms and new institutes for his presentation, for his report. He was a student of mine many years ago, and over the past few days we've had the possibility to to have a chat about these topics. So what I would like to tell you is that the famous mixed commission envisaged by number 62 of Vita Consecrata met and also developed a project that was sent to the Secretariat of State over 10 years ago, and it remained dead letter. Well, most of the problems that were risen in these 10 proposals are things that the Dicastery already knows about. It has already been dealing with these themes for the past few years. The issue of mixed institutes, which we've had to deal with for all the Franciscan institutes, the institutes of the Franciscan family, which were established as lay institutes and became became clerical institutes, and now they're required to become mixed institutes so that fraternity can actually be prominent. Well, this issue has been studied by the Dicastery for many, many years, but by all the competent authorities in the Holy See. Recently, they directly asked this authorization to the Pope directly, so that the Pope may bestow this as a privilege. So, I mean, we know of these situations. We know that life goes well beyond canon law. We jurists continue to call the 1983 code the new code, but this code is already old for certain aspects, and we know that life really goes beyond the code, and canon law itself is too strict. Because it doesn't allow for alternatives. So many of these proposals have already been the object of our reflection. At the same time, we have to say that the Dicastery only has an administrative authority, and it cannot do anything about the law, canon law. And even when we asked to partially modify certain canons, we were met with a lot of resistance and hesitancy. So in principle, in general, we agree with the terminology, with the inappropriateness, inadequacy of the canon law, but we are not actually competent for implementing these changes, even though we suggested some of them. What I would like to ask you is that both the reports of yesterday and those of today be handed in to the Secretariat, so that the reflection that is underway, which will continue, may actually draw inspiration from the echoes of your discussion.
Due cose. Siamo già d'accordo con.
Now, a couple of things. We already agreed with our Archbishop, Secretary Carvalho. We will propose again to the Dicastery of the laity to form, once again, this small commission, to establish this new small commission, so that we may continue this discussion, so that our two dicasteries may continue this discussion. So this is the first thing. And secondly, probably at the end of this meeting, we will write a very nice letter, a sort of memory, let's say, to remind those in authority that after these 10 years passed after the establishment of that commission, and that there are still pending issues, so that we may remember those in authority that these problems are still alive in the people of God. I think that this is something that could be useful.
Prego.
Good morning. I'll speak in English on behalf of the Societies of Apostolic Life. In regards to our consecration with the specificity with respect to the baptismal consecration, there were two Societies of Apostolic Life who were present who see their consecration as the fulfillment of their baptismal consecration, but really as part of their baptismal consecration. The rest of those present saw the roots of their consecration in baptism, but saw the profession of the evangelical councils as new, special, distinct, as a sign of total conformity to Christ, who was chaste, poor, and obedient. For the second question, considering the diverse forms of the Sequela Christi, what are the common elements and what are those which express the originality of our group? The common elements of Societies of Apostolic Life seem to be three. The first, the profession of the evangelical councils in one mode or another, some private, some public, some calling them vows, some promises. The second, fraternal life in community, albeit with some flexibility. and third, a common mission based on the community's proper law. The originality is largely based on the flexibility that the groups are afforded in order to meet the demands of the mission or apostolate. For example, prayer in common varies according to the needs of the mission. In general, the flexibility afforded to societies of apostolic life in their combination of prayer, community life, and mission seems noteworthy and significant. Secondly, the groups present all indicated that they would like to be publicly acknowledged as being consecrated. In regards to the third question, what changes need to be done to canon law so as to follow life? In general, we noted that the richness that is already present in canon law, and we would only propose one concrete change. All of the societies of apostolic life present at this conference see themselves as being consecrated, and yet in the Code of Canon Law, in Part 2 of Book 2, only Section 1 is called Institutes of Consecrated Life. So we would propose that the whole section be called Institutes of Consecrated Life, and underneath that would be first, religious institutes, second, secular institutes, and third, societies of apostolic life. One of those present in our group stated that he believes there are a few groups, although not present at the conference, that claim that they don't take promises and are societies of apostolic life. So the suggestion here would be to potentially reclassify these few groups and move them into some other type of association. Thank you.
Bene, ringraziamo.
Very well. I would like to thank these societies of apostolic life that has highlighted exactly the problems that surround this form of consecration. And in fact, Canon 731 is 2 paragraphs in the case under societies of apostolic life, those societies that profess the evangelical vows and those that do not profess them. And the doctrine, even though the code has the Latin Code classified as the Societies of Apostolic Life as an appendix to the Institutes of Consecrated Life. Well, the Eastern Code makes a distinction, a clear-cut distinction between the Societies of Apostolic Life that emit through vows or other promises, the evangelical vows that actually assumes the evangelical councils, and the societies of apostolic life it pursue common life and the missionary idea without, however, assuming vows or other promises. Probably this should be reconsidered. In fact, at the end of the seminar, in my presentation, I said that the societies of apostolic life are a topic that needs further consideration so that it could be better integrated in the dynamism of consecrated life. Now, we will have another report.
Da parte delle associazioni e movimenti.
Associations and movements. Well, I'll leave the floor to His Excellency first. Good morning, and now I'm going to present the 3 points. Let's start with the first. Well, there have been various answers which were given, but there is a common denominator in all of them, which is consecration. Consecration helps us discover the gifts of baptism. Now, the charism gives new impetus to the baptism. It brings about an existential change in us, an ontological change. Thanks to the charism, we rediscover baptismal consecration, and this new discovery occurs in people who live fraternal love. New forms of consecrated life, and this is quite interesting, offer the young the possibility to find their identity, to discover their identity as Christians. So here we have the specificity of consecrated life, of our consecrated life, which is given by a baptism, which brings about a change of mentality in us. In other words, we become Christians who are aware of their duty to bear witness to the gospel. And this personal but also collective witness is of utmost importance if we actually bear witness to this together. If I were to give an individual witness, I would speak without a microphone. But a collective witness is when we have a microphone, when we are heard by many. So this community witness is the strongest form of apostolate, of ministry. Now, the second question. The element in common, as a common element, is the radical the radical surrender to God through the evangelical counsels, lived in the specificity of our various movements, of the various charisms. Some of us have highlighted the aspect of multivocationality, which means to experience, to abide by the vows, by respecting the state of life of the others. We are all on an equal footing, but so the vows do not make me superior to anyone else. But first of all, we have fraternity, and this is the priority. And then embracing the mission amongst many other brothers of different states of life. This is a true acceptance. It is a common mission. So we have a common acceptance, but at the same time, an individual acceptance. Others also mention the originality of our family, of our Institute of Families. It's maybe that we are married. This is the experience of a group. And natural love. And this natural love has been enhanced by God through poverty and purity. And then we also had the group of widows who said that to consecrate our state of life, we are called to witness in the church the indivisible bond between God and the Church, and we are called to bear witness to the gospel. Others also said to generate Christ in the world through our communities, to keep alive His presence, to give it to the world. Because this is the goal, this is the objective, this is the basis, the core. That is, we need to bring Christ, to generate Christ and bring Him to the world. And who did that? Mary, who generated God. So she did this masterwork, this work of art for humanity. And this is what humanity expects. Humanity wants to meet this God that was generated by Mary. And we can do so if we live like she lived. And then another point. Our communities also include married couples. Our movements include married couples. And we intend to highlight that what matters is love, not the vow. This is another important point. And now the third question. Some said that we feel in us a new life. The Church is our mother. We need to be recognized. We need to receive her recognition. In the past, there have been some difficulties, but the Church has always intended to help us. The Church has always been our mother. At the same time, we feel the need to see a recognition in canon law. Canon law should recognize the charisms which are the basis of these new movements. And in which our consecrations, from which our consecrations originate. This is what how the code should be changed. So this third question, what changes need to be done to canon law so as to follow life? Well, I believe that canon law should recognize movements, whereas movements are still not included in canon law. Someone also mentioned that the aspect of communion is not easy to be lived with the present code. For instance, many communities were established by lay people, and the church supported us. And currently, we're under the responsibility of the Dicastery for the laity. At the same time, we feel the need for a dialogue with the other dicasteries. The organization of the church seems to work to operate on a silo mentality. So we feel the need for an interdicasterial dialogue. So the proposal that was presented the other day has been welcomed with great enthusiasm, because it will give greater consideration to the life of these movements and associations. Clearly, there will be still some pending issues, such as the issue of the incarnation of priests and also the recognition of consecration among married couples or married people. Someone also said that we need a juridical form that may include multivocational realities with consecrations of different forms. Others also said that we need to have a theological redefinition of consecration so that we may get to a canon definition, a definition according to canon law. And we still feel a sort of friction between the style and the form. It is very difficult, we know, to include in canon law these new forms of life which were generated, which arose from charisms, which were the gift of the Spirit. The Spirit is dynamic, it is ever evolving, and charisms belong to the Marian profile. So they immediately remind us of Mary. Mary, who was love herself. She generated new experiences, new forms. In other words, these charisms somehow are lobbying the institutions, and they are the beauty of the church. Now, let me make a comparison. The patrons, the institutions of the church are like the skeleton of the backbone of a person. You cannot live without a backbone. It's like a skeleton. So it is fundamental to have institutions within the church. However, it should not appear. It should be hidden under the skin. What should be seen in a body is the outside of the body, the skin, the beauty of the body. And the skin is the people of God, the charisms that the church is enriched by. So this is really a strong need that we feel. Let us try and live together in close union with the institutions. So I would like to conclude by saying that we are old and new charisma represented here, and it is an enormous richness. At the same time, one day, everything will finish, the institutions will finish, and what will remain? The words of Jesus, the charisms, I dare to say. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you for all your contributions, and I wish to remind you that you should hand them in writing to the Secretariat, those that you wrote yesterday and those you wrote today. So we can take now a break now, and we will resume at 10:15. Thank you.